For 10 days in the autumn of 1938, an English mill town became certain that a man with a blade was stalking its streets, slashing anyone he could catch in the dark. Mobs hunted him. Scotland Yard was called. Dozens swore they had felt his knife. And in the end, the police proved that he had never existed at all. The town was Halifax in the north of England, a place of stone terraces, cobbled streets, and tall mill chimneys, where the fog came down thick between the houses at night. In November of 1938, that fog would slowly fill with a phantom, and the whole town would help to build him. It began with two women. Mary Gledhill and Gertrude Watts told the police they had been attacked in the dark by a strange man. They described him with one vivid, memorable detail. He had bright, shining buckles on his shoes. The town would seize on that single detail and multiply it 100-fold. There was no serious injury and no suspect. But the story was already perfect. A stranger in the dark, a weapon, a gleam of metal you might catch a half-second before he was upon you. It was a story built to spread, and Halifax was about to prove exactly how far a story like that can travel. Within days, the reports multiplied. Men and women came forward all over town, breathless, describing the same attack. A figure lunging from an alley, a sudden slash of pain, a blade or a mallet, and those shining buckles catching the lamplight just before he vanished back into the fog. And the wounds were real. People displayed genuine cuts and bruises. They were shaking, pale, and utterly convinced. This was not a town of liars. It was a town of frightened people whose bodies and memories had begun working together to build an attacker out of the empty dark. So Halifax armed itself. Groups of men formed vigilante patrols, roaming the streets at night with sticks and lanterns, hunting the slasher. Any stranger, any man walking alone after dark became a suspect. The hunt itself soon grew more dangerous than the phantom it was chasing. Innocent men were chased through the streets. Crowds gathered and surged at the mere cry of an attack. A town that had been perfectly ordinary a week before was now a place where a single scream could turn a shadow into a mob before anyone had seen a thing. And every single day, the newspapers printed it all. Fresh attacks, new victims, the slasher still at large. Each edition confirmed that the danger was real and growing, named the phantom, counted his victims, and told every reader exactly what to fear the next time they heard a footstep close behind them. The local police were overwhelmed, so they did the thing you do when a menace seems too large to handle alone. They called in Scotland Yard. Detectives arrived from London to catch a slasher who had terrorized an entire town. And almost at once, the case began to dissolve in their hands. Because the detectives did something the panic itself never had. They looked closely and calmly at the actual evidence. And the actual evidence made no sense. No consistent description of the man. No blood where there should have been blood. Wounds that did not match any attack the victims described. The pattern was wrong in a very particular way. The cuts were all where a person could easily reach. They were shallow and careful, the kind a frightened hand makes on its own body. The slasher, if he was real, only ever struck exactly where his victims could have struck themselves. And then came the moment the whole story turned. One of the men who had reported an attack, a man named Percy Waddington, was questioned closely. And under that questioning, he finally admitted the truth. No one had touched him. In a moment of fear, he could no longer explain. He had done it to himself. And once the first confession broke, the rest came quickly. One by one, the victims of the Halifax Slasher admitted that their wounds were self-inflicted, or imagined, or invented in a moment of terror. Of 12 key cases, all but 3 confessed. There had never been an attacker at all. Now sit with how strange that is. These were not people telling an obvious lie. Many of them, in the grip of the panic, genuinely felt attacked. Their fear was so complete that a small self-inflicted scratch, in a dark and terrified moment, could feel exactly like a stranger's blade in the fog. That is the engine this archive keeps returning to. Mass hysteria, a community wound tight with fear, a story of a threat and real physical symptoms passing from person to person with nothing solid at the center. In Halifax, the man in the fog was made entirely out of other people's terror. And Halifax in 1938 was wound very tight indeed. Europe stood on the edge of war. The papers were already full of gas masks and coming bombers. Money was short, the nights were long and truly dark, and the fog was real. Into all of that dread, two women dropped a man with shining buckles. But notice what actually carried it. Not the fog, the front page. Every self-inflicted wound became tomorrow's headline, and every headline told the next frightened person precisely which attack to have. The press reported the panic, and by reporting it, produced more of it. A perfect, profitable loop. You have seen this loop before. In Mattoon, a newspaper breathed life into a phantom gasser. Here, a newspaper breathed life into a phantom slasher. Almost the same year, the same machine exactly. A real fear poured through the amplifier of the daily press and sold back to the town one copy at a time. And when it ended the way these things always do. Not with a capture, but with a correction. Scotland Yard announced flatly that there was no slasher, and the attacks, which no patrol had ever managed to stop, simply stopped. The phantom evaporated the very moment the story did. There was a bill to pay. 5 people were charged with public mischief for wasting the time of a town at the edge of war. 4 of them went to prison. They were not evil. They were ordinary people caught inside a fear so large that it had briefly rewritten what they believed had happened to their own bodies. But the people who truly amplified the panic paid nothing at all. The papers that had printed the slasher into existence, edition after edition, simply printed the ending too and moved on to the next story. The fear had sold very well while it lasted. That, in the end, was the whole point of it. And this is the quiet injustice at the center of nearly every file here. The ones who spread the fear are rewarded. The frightened few who act on it are punished. And the amplifier, the thing that turned a scream in the fog into a town under siege, walks away clean, counting the day's sales. So ask the question this archive always asks. Who profited from the Halifax Slasher? Not the 4 who went to prison. The presses profited. Fear was the product. A frightened town is a town that buys the evening paper to learn where he struck last night. The panic was not a failure of the business, it was the business. And it would be comforting to believe we have simply grown out of this, that we would never chase a man who was never there or feel a wound that no one had ever given us. But the machine did not disappear when the fog lifted. It only found faster wires to run along. Today, the phantom does not need a newspaper. A rumor of a stranger harming people races across a city through screens in a single afternoon. A wave of mysterious symptoms spreads through a school by video. We still manufacture attackers out of fog, only now the fog is global and instant. And the tell is always the same, a single vivid detail that spreads faster than any proof. Shining buckles on his shoes. A specific, shareable image of the threat passed from frightened mind to frightened mind, arriving long before anyone thinks to ask whether the man wearing them was ever real. A whole town out in the fog with sticks and lanterns, hunting a slasher who was only ever the town itself, frightened, in the dark, cutting at shadows. It would be almost funny if 4 people had not gone to prison for it, and if it were not still happening, right now, under 100 newer names. The Halifax Phantom at least left marks you could see, even if the wrong hands had made them. But fear can be stranger still. It can make an entire modern city look up, inspect its own windows, and see the damage of an attack that was never there, and that had in fact been there all along. The next file is the Seattle windshield pitting epidemic. The archive stays open.